so much better, so much more fun than it used to be. Because remember in the 70s, the 80s, even the early 90s, you had to spend hours on end in a studio. And
second chances, he had seen it all. But lately, the rock icon made a shockingly honest confession about the one woman he believes he should have never let walk away. Considering everything Stewart has been through, that admission stunned many fans, because behind the fame sold-out arenas and his larger-than-life persona was a relationship that left scars, deeper than the public ever realized. So who was the woman he could never really forget? Let us find out. The brutal early struggles of Rod Stewart. When the singer entered the world in North London on January 10th, 1945, World War II was still raging across Europe. Life in Britain was tough, uncertain, and entirely shaped by wartime struggle. But inside the Stewart household, things felt very different. His father worked as a construction manager while his mother raised the children at home. Rod, the youngest of all five, quickly became the center of the family's world. Being the baby of the house came with plenty of perks. He was spoiled, endlessly showered with love, and kept shielded from the harsher realities of life for a long time. Years later, Stewart would look back on those early days and describe his childhood as being fantastically happy. That happiness, though, also made growing up a little bit harder. Responsibility did not come naturally to him. Inside the Stewart home, two major passions ruled over everything else: soccer and music. The whole family lived and breathed both. On the soccer pitch, young Rod stood out immediately. He was aggressive, talented, competitive, and completely fearless. People around him truly believed he had the skill to make something of himself in the sport. Music pulled at him just as hard. The Stewart family adored American singer Al Jolson, but the artist who really changed Rod's life was Little Richard. The raw energy, the voice, the swagger, it totally grabbed hold of him. Rod became obsessed. Seeing how serious his son was, his father eventually bought him his first guitar, unknowingly placing a different possible future right into his hands. Before long, Rod Stewart found himself torn between two massive dreams. At 15 years old, he made a move that would terrify most parents. He dropped out of school to pursue a career in professional soccer. Academics had never suited him anyway. In Rod, the autobiography, Stewart admitted nobody was surprised when he failed his 11-plus exam and ended up transferring to William Grimshaw Secondary Modern School. He tried to fit in, but he never felt connected to the classroom or the structure. By the end of his school years, things had only gotten much worse. He constantly clashed with his teachers, and eventually his wild behavior landed him in serious trouble. Stewart was even caned before finally leaving school behind for good. He walked away with no qualifications, no clear plan, and plenty of uncertainty. Still, he believed soccer might save him. Stewart earned a tryout with Brentford FCA, third division club at the time. For years, rumors floated around claiming the club really wanted to sign him. But Stewart later admitted the truth was much harsher. After the tryout, they never even bothered calling him back. That rejection could have crushed him. Instead, it pushed him toward music. Oddly enough, Stewart was not completely devastated about losing his shot at professional soccer. Part of the reason came down to something surprisingly simple. He loved to party. In his mind, a musician's lifestyle sounded far more forgiving than an athlete's. Singing seemed like the one career where drinking heavily would not automatically destroy his future. So he pivoted completely. The problem was that dreams of rock stardom did not pay the bills. To help support the family, Stewart started working at his father's newspaper stand. By then, his father had left construction behind and purchased the shop where the family also lived in the flat upstairs. Rod handled newspaper deliveries, spending his mornings hauling papers around London while still clinging to fantasies of becoming a singer. Music remained the main goal, but reality kept dragging him into ordinary jobs. After leaving the newspaper stand, Stewart took a screen printing job at a wallpaper company through his father's connections. For a while, things actually seemed quite promising. The pay was decent, especially for someone his age, and Stewart even contributed money toward household expenses. Then, a disaster struck in the most ironic Way possible. He discovered he was colorblind. For someone working in wallpaper printing, that was a total catastrophe. The job quickly fell apart, forcing Stewart back into the grind. It was just temporary work and constant uncertainty. He bounced from one strange gig to another. He framed pictures, spent time training to be an electrician, and even picked up odd jobs over at Highgate Cemetery. That cemetery work felt unusual enough, but somehow his next role turned even darker. Stewart eventually found himself working in a funeral home surrounded by cadavers and grieving families while dreaming of future fame and massive sold-out concerts. Through it all, he refused to quit music. At 16, he joined a band called the Raiders, and suddenly it felt like his life might finally be heading in the right direction. The group landed an audition with legendary producer Joe Meek, one of the biggest names in British music at the time. For Stewart, this was supposed to be the life-changing opportunity. Instead, it turned into an absolute humiliation. During the audition, Meek heard Stewart singing and reacted in a way that would scar almost any young musician. He stormed into the studio, covered his ears, and started screaming for Stewart to stop. Legend has it, Meek refused to calm down until Rod packed up and left. It was brutal. For a teenager already struggling to find his way, the rejection felt deeply, painfully personal. Stewart likely walked out feeling humiliated and furious. But history proved that Joe Meek's judgment was far from flawless. After all, Meek also passed on David Bowie and famously dismissed the Beatles as nothing more than just noise, still knowing that later probably did little to ease the sting back then. Stewart carried that frustration with him and started drifting into London's growing counterculture scene. He became involved in anti-nuclear protests, surrounded himself with beatniks, and moved into a communal lifestyle filled with activism, politics, and rebellion. From the outside, it looked like Rod Stewart had become deeply committed to social causes and world peace. But Stewart later admitted there was a different motivation behind all that protesting. He mainly showed up because he wanted to meet women. And in the middle of that chaotic chapter, he eventually met someone who would change his future forever, though not without bringing some painful consequences along with it. Rod Stewart's most controversial romance. In 1962, Rod Stewart met an artist named Susanna Boffey at a nightclub, and the relationship moved fast immediately. They were young, reckless, and caught up in the thrill of London's growing music and nightlife scene. Before long, Boffey discovered she was pregnant. For most people, that kind of news changes everything. But Stewart was only 17, and instead of stepping into the role of father or husband, he pulled away completely. Backed by his family, he decided he wanted no part of settling down. While Boffey prepared to face motherhood alone, Stewart simply walked away years. Later, the painful reality of what happened during that chapter of Boffey's life became public knowledge. In 2013, Stewart released a song called Brighton Beach, describing it as a tribute to a real woman from his past. It did not take long for people to realize the track was about Boffey, the mother of his first child. But when she finally heard it, she was furious. The song painted their romance in a soft, dreamy light, and even suggested her father played a role in tearing them apart. Boffey remembered things very differently. According to Stewart, abandoned her the moment he learned she was carrying his child. For Stewart, Brighton Beach might have represented youthful romance and nostalgia. For Boffey, it was the exact place where her boyfriend severed ties and left her to face an impossible situation on her own. Things spiraled fast after that. Once her landlord learned she was unmarried and pregnant, she was evicted. Suddenly homeless and vulnerable, Boffey ended up in a home for unwed teenage mothers, where young women were expected to perform hard manual labor in exchange for shelter. Even through all that heartbreak, part of her still believed Stewart might return. Then came November 1963. Boffey gave birth alone at Whittington Hospital in London. Stewart eventually showed up after the birth, but not because he was suddenly ready to embrace fatherhood. Instead, he made a shocking proposal. He asked if she would give the baby up for adoption so the two of them could continue. dating. Buffy did eventually place the child for adoption, but it had nothing to do with saving their relationship. By then, the damage was already done. While that painful chapter unfolded behind him, Stewart threw himself deeper into music. He became immersed in the folk scene, busking on London streets, and chasing any opportunity he could find. Eventually, he teamed up with folk singer Wiz Jones, and together they traveled through places like Paris and Barcelona, drifting through that classic messy life of a starving musician back then. Barcelona, though, meant trouble. Stewart and his bandmates were barely scraping by day to day, sleeping rough and hunkering down under bridges whenever they absolutely had to. Local cops decided he looked more like a homeless drifter than a musician. Before long, Stewart got deported out of the country entirely. Still, even setbacks like that could never kill his passion for music. Years before Stewart grabbed a harmonica on a whim, never guessing just how crucial that tiny instrument would turn out to be. That talent earned him a spot in a group called The Dimensions, playing harmonica and singing backup. While rocking out with the band, he suddenly found himself sharing stages with Britain's biggest act, the Rolling Stones. For Stewart, watching Mick Jagger command a massive crowd up close was a total turning point. Backstage, feeling the swagger, the ego, and the pure electricity of rock stardom, he finally knew exactly what he wanted. He stopped dreaming of just being a singer. He wanted to be a massive rock star, but success remained elusive. By 1964, Stewart was still a total nobody, busking at Twickenham railway station for spare change. One day, after catching a set by musician Long John Baldry, Stewart happened to be busking when Baldry walked past and actually heard him. That random lucky moment changed absolutely everything. Baldry was impressed enough to invite Stewart to join his band as a blues harmonica player. Then he heard him sing and realized there was something much bigger here. Stewart quickly became a core member of the group, and suddenly the industry doors started swinging open. Performing with Baldry eventually landed Stewart a gig, opening for the Rolling Stones, putting him even closer to that life he desperately wanted to claim. From there, he joined the Jeff Beck Group and later jumped into the band Faces in 1969, all while secretly building a solo career on the side. It was an exhausting, brutal grind, but Stewart lived for it. He juggled bands, tours, and records, all at once, determined to make his mark on one of the toughest industries in the entire world. Eventually, all that hard work paid off in a huge way. Stewart exploded into massive mainstream fame across America, quickly becoming one of the biggest rock icons of the 1970s. Hits like Tonight's the Night and Daya Think I'm Sexy made him a household name. And with fame came everything he had craved: serious cash, wild parties, elite circles, and endless attention from women. By his own honest admission, his romantic life got so chaotic during his Faces years that he eventually lost count of how many women he had been with. One of them was actor Joanna Lumley, way back before she became a global star for Absolutely Fabulous. Ironically, when they first met, Lumley had zero clue that Stewart was a famous rock star. She later explained that she suffered from bad facial recognition and just did not recognize him at all. Still, she agreed to a date, and by all reports, Stewart left a really positive impression on her. Lumley later recalled riding with him in one of his flashy sports cars when she suggested speeding past other drivers. Stewart refused, calmly telling her that having a fast car didn't give anyone the right to be a jerk on the road. It was a surprisingly humble, grounded moment from a man surrounded by so much excess. Their romance eventually fizzled for a reason Stewart later admitted with a bit of embarrassment. Lumley's posh upper-class accent honestly intimidated him. Compared to his rough North London roots, he felt way out of place around her. Before long, Stewart was single again, while drama also started brewing inside the band Faces. By the mid-70s, the group was clearly falling apart. When they officially split in 1975, Stewart went full force into his solo career. The timing couldn't have been better. His ballad Sailings became a massive chart-topping smash across the United Kingdom and the Netherlands. Even though the song failed to make much noise in America, Stewart was already becoming one of Britain's biggest musical icons. He moved easily through elite celebrity circles, partying with actors, musicians, and socialites. One of those legends was actor and author Joan Collins, who decided Stewart should meet her friend Britt Ekland, the gorgeous Swedish actress famous for appearing as a Bond girl in The Man with the Golden Gun. The spark between Stewart and Ekland was instant. Before long, they were living together, and Ekland quickly became one of the main muses behind Stewart's music. While searching for ideas for a new track, Stewart found himself drawing heavily from their fiery romance. It spawned a massive hit for him. Tonight is the Night. The song was raw, seductive, and loaded with innuendo. It finally gave Stewart the American breakthrough he had been hunting for. Tonight is the Night hit #1 in both the United States and Canada, turning him from a successful British rocker into a bona fide international music icon. Yet as his career skyrocketed, his personal life stayed messy. During their romance, Ekland introduced Stewart to her friend actress Susan George. Before long, Stewart began a secret affair with her, essentially tanking his relationship with Ekland. Stewart later offered a very different story for the breakup, claiming things soured after Ekland once tried applying makeup on him. A look he felt clashed with his macho persona. But for most fans, the affair felt like the far more believable reason. Shortly after the split, Stewart jumped into another high-profile relationship, this time with blonde model Alana Collins, who had previously been married to actor George Hamilton. Unlike many of Stewart's earlier flings, this one became serious enough to lead to a wedding. Ironically, even at 34 years old, Stewart's father felt his son was still far too immature to settle down. Years later, Stewart admitted his dad may have been right. Part of him felt he had rushed into marriage before fully getting the wildlife out of his system. Still, the wedding proceeded, and the couple soon welcomed 2 children, daughter Kimberly and son Sean Stewart. For a moment, it looked like Rod Stewart might finally be settling into a quiet family life. But that stability did not last very long. Before long, Stewart started another affair, this time with model Kelly Emberg. We need to look behind Rod Stewart's wild reputation. Rod Stewart's relationship with the Sports Illustrated model Kelly Emberg turned out to be the final blow to his marriage with Alana Collins. The divorce hit Collins hard. Years later, she admitted the breakup left her completely shattered, and knowing Emberg was 15 years younger only made the emotional pain much worse. Stewart himself later confessed that ending relationships was never something he handled well. In his own words, he was a total coward whenever it came to breaking up with women. Still, even after the collapse of another marriage, Stewart did not exactly hit the brakes. By that point in his life, a pattern had emerged. Stewart clearly had a type: tall, gorgeous blonde models, but while he seemed endlessly fascinated by romance and dating, fatherhood often seemed to complicate things for him. His relationship with Kelly Emberg followed a familiar path. Once Emberg became pregnant, the spark began to fade, and Stewart's focus started drifting elsewhere. Instead of settling into domestic bliss, he threw himself deeper into the wild celebrity lifestyle he had spent years crafting. During that era, Stewart openly bragged about the sheer number of women he was sleeping with. He owned a bright yellow Lamborghini and frequently drove from his home in Windsor into London, a trip that took about 45 minutes, just to spend nights at his favorite nightclub. One story perfectly captures the chaotic life he was living at the time. After meeting a woman at the club one night, Stewart drove her all the way back to Windsor, spent the night, then drove her straight back to London afterward without even stopping for breakfast. But the night did not end there. After dropping her off, he returned to the club, found another woman, and drove all the way back to Windsor again for round 2. Stewart later joked that he waited until the following morning before sleeping with the second woman, apparently believing that detail somehow made the whole story more respectable. As outrageous as his lifestyle became, Stewart somehow managed to dodge the total self-destruction that claimed many rock stars of his generation. He often credited 2 things for keeping him grounded enough to survive soccer and women. According to Stewart, those passions stopped him from falling too deeply into hard drugs or heavy alcoholism. In his mind, excessive addiction would have ruined his ability to play sports and damaged his sex life, two things he valued above almost everything else. At least on some level, Stewart understood why so many women were drawn to him. He admitted that fame played a massive role. Being a wealthy, internationally famous rock star naturally opened doors that most men would never even experience. But he also acknowledged a darker truth beneath all the attention. He had not always treated women particularly well. Stewart often defended himself by arguing that most men would behave exactly the same if they faced constant celebrity temptations. In his mind, fame just amplified personality traits that already existed. Next, a new woman appeared, fitting his now infamous dating pattern perfectly. Back in the late 80s, Rod Stewart met New Zealand model Rachel Hunter at an LA nightclub. She was tall blonde, absolutely stunning, and over 20 years younger than the rock star. Hunter was just 21 at the time. But there was one major complication. She was already seeing musician Kip Winger, the bassist for the Alice Cooper group. Once Hunter got to know Stewart, everything shifted fast. She dumped Winger almost immediately. Just 3 months after meeting the pair were married. For Stewart, this felt different than past flings. He felt certain Hunter was the one he would finally commit to forever. The couple soon started a family welcoming daughter Renee in '92 and son Liam in '94. Contrary to what most people assumed later, it was not Stewart who ruined the marriage through cheating. Actually, Stewart has always maintained Rachel Hunter was the one woman he never betrayed. Instead, it was Hunter who finally walked out on the marriage in '99. According to Stewart, she just got exhausted by the celebrity lifestyle and the surrounding chaos. She wanted a normal, quiet life. That decision completely devastated him. Despite his reputation for endless partying and casual flings, the split from Hunter hit him hard. Eventually, as always, he moved on. In '99, while prepping for a tour, his team hired photographer Penny Lancaster. She was more than just a photographer, she was a successful model towering over Stewart with her presence. The chemistry between them was undeniable right from the start. Funnily enough, Stewart's own bandmates tried to stop the romance from ever taking off. One bass player realized that Stewart was just rebounding from his painful divorce and feared the worst. After grabbing Lancaster's number, the bassist hid it for 6 months, fearing the singer was too fragile. Looking back, Stewart later admitted his bandmate was probably doing the right thing. Still, once they finally connected, Stewart became absolutely obsessed with her. Trying to impress her, he took her shopping at Dolce & Gabbana, encouraging a total wardrobe overhaul. By the time they walked out, Stewart had dropped roughly $12,000 in one go. There was one weird condition attached to that massive gift, though. Stewart told her she could only wear those outfits when they were together. Despite that strange possessiveness, Lancaster stayed. Her family, however, remained skeptical. By then, Stewart's reputation as a notorious womanizer was impossible to ignore. Lancaster's father reportedly disliked the romance, and her brother Oliver feared Stewart would pull her into scandal. Ironically, Oliver eventually changed his tune so much that he took a job working for Stewart himself. In 2005, Stewart and Lancaster welcomed their first child, a son named Alistair. 2 years later, Stewart surprised the world by walking down the aisle for a third time. The wedding happened in Portofino, Italy, and shortly after they welcomed another son, Aidan. By this point, Stewart was the father of 8 children, but he finally seemed ready for stability. Just as things seemed settled, a long-forgotten chapter of his past came crashing back into his life. In 2007, Stewart was inside an LA recording studio when the receptionist called up with a shock. A young woman was waiting in the lobby claiming to be his long-lost daughter. At first, Stewart figured it had to be some kind of elaborate scam. To avoid any embarrassment, he sent his bandmate Jim Craig down to investigate first. The second Craig saw the woman, his doubts vanished. She looked exactly like Rod Stewart. The woman introduced herself as Sarah Streeter. As Stewart processed the news, it all clicked. She was the daughter he had with Susanna Buffett decades ago, the same woman who inspired Maggie May. Sarah's life had been tough, filled with addiction and struggle before she learned the truth about her father. It was surreal. Stewart had been famous for so long that his poster hung on her wall growing up. After her adoptive mother passed away, Sarah finally reached out. Their relationship was awkward at first. It was shaped by years of distance and plenty of unanswered questions between father and daughter. Over time, things improved. Sarah eventually found her place as part of the wider Stewart family. Even as he settled down later in life, stories from his wild past continued to follow him. One of the strangest resurfaced during a 2012 appearance on Katie Couric's talk show. Couric grilled Stewart about a decades-old urban legend. It claimed he ended up in the emergency room after a wild night partying with sailors. That rumor became one of rock music's most bizarre gossip tales. Clearly uncomfortable, Stewart denied it firmly. He insisted he was completely heterosexual. He explained that he believed the story was started by a former publicist he had fired years before. According to Stewart, the guy spread the rumor as revenge after being dismissed from his job. The problem was that the claim could never be verified because, according to Stewart, the man had since died. Still, while Stewart seemed embarrassed by that rumor, he was often strangely proud of other outrageous stories. In his autobiography, he openly admitted to cheating on one centerfold model with another. He even confessed that while he was involved with Kelly Emberg, he was being unfaithful to her too. For many, it raised the same question over and over again. What exactly made Rod Stewart so irresistible to women? Ironically, Stewart himself claimed his secret was simple. For decades, he relied on the exact same pickup line whenever he was approaching women. Somehow, despite sounding completely ridiculous on paper, it apparently worked for him time and time again. Of course, it helped that the guy delivering the line was a millionaire rock icon. Plus, he had one of the most recognizable voices in the entire history of music. After 3 marriages, 8 children, and decades living one of a rock's wildest lives, Stewart reflected on love. True to form, even his conclusions on marriage came wrapped in a layer of humor and cynicism. Instead of ever getting married again, Stewart joked that if he were single, he would do something else. He said he would just find a woman he did not like and buy her a house instead. Rod Stewart names the one woman he shouldn't have let go, even though he is happily married to Penny. Lancaster, the rock legend, has spent more time lately looking back on the relationships that shaped him. During a recent interview with The Times, Stewart reflected on the night he first met Penny. They met at a bar shortly after his marriage to his second wife, Rachel Hunter, collapsed. Before, Rachel Stewart was married to Alana Stewart from 1979 to 1984. His love life was one long winding chapter of Hyde's heartbreak and constant reinvention. As Stewart remembered it, Penny walked up asking for an autograph. The conversation turned memorable fast. Completely captivated by her confidence, he later described her as an incredible dancer who stood out instantly. Still behind that charming story was a painful period that Stewart rarely tries to hide. He admitted that while he was lucky to find love again, his breakup with Rachel Hunter hit him incredibly hard. There was a 6-month stretch between the split and meeting Penny. Part of that was because his bass player refused to hand over Penny's phone number. According to Stewart, his friend thought he needed time to enjoy single life instead of rushing into things. Stewart later admitted his bandmate was probably right, joking that he made the most of those months. But underneath the humor was genuine heartbreak. Stewart confessed that Rachel leaving him tore him apart emotionally. Looking back, he believed their massive age gap played a major role in the relationship falling apart. Rachel was only 21 when she married the 45-year-old rock star. That gap immediately concerned his family from the very beginning. Even his own sister reportedly warned him it might never work long term. And in many ways, Rachel Hunter later agreed with that assessment herself. Speaking with the New Zealand Herald years later, she admitted that her youth heavily influenced the breakup. The way it did. Even though hurting Stewart was agony for her, she admitted that they both finally came to realize exactly why their marriage just could not survive anymore.